To be honest, I'm probably underselling the timeline. It all starts for me back in 2020 when my nonverbal autistic daughter couldn't blow out a candle. I instinctually realized this was the motor neuromuscular system. Something physical was happening. So I targeted these neural circuits with something called neuroplasticity, a program I now call neurotoggle. Every behavior and skill is a neural circuit, and the connections of these are primarily driven based on experiences after birth through a process called neuroplasticity. So I figured out how to optimize this because research indicates this process is disrupted in autistics. I track this disruption to gene mutations that trigger a system-wide stress response that does not turn off. This disrupts typical development and typical function in biochemically predictable ways, specifically a BH4 shunt that leads to simultaneous autism traits and comorbid traits. I figured this out through creating a biochemical network, which I did very publicly, and then overlaying autism biomarkers to figure out where the disruptions were. It all happened in 2023. When I realized all existing autism biomarkers and data supported this theory instead of falsifying it, because it is falsifiable, just the data supports it instead of falsifying it, I turned my page into a living documentary, and I was publicly verbally abused. But I sucked it up because I knew that I would need it as evidence that this was novel and mine. Just based on history, I knew what had happened to people before me, and I knew I wasn't special, so it would happen to me in my lifetime as well. I was not expecting it to come from the Ivy Leagues, though. The first person who used my work unsighted was Brazil. For some background on the significance of unsighted text, anytime you make a scientific claim or statement in a paper, you have to back it up with the primary source, where that statement came from. These papers in 2025 that start using my framework do so via unsighted text. This is a hallmark of plagiarism because they're not citing their primary source. I am the primary source, so it has never been stated in literature before me. They could not find someone else to reference. Because these conclusions were drawn through the building of my biochemical network. I was floored because the last several years I had been called a pseudoscientist for this exact theory, just have it show up in a paper in Brazil as uncited text. At this point, I was going viral on social media. I had just been plagiarized by Brazil, and I immediately called my DC rep because I'm like, is there any sort of institutional oversight that I can go to advance this if it is right? Because I know I'm doing this through unconventional channels, but that's just the way that the chips fell. This is my call log. In that phone call, which I do have a video on April 4th that I made after that phone call to document the conversation, they asked me how I did what I did and what I did. I told them I synthesized all of the existing autism literature to figure out the pathology of autism to help my nonverbal autistic daughter. And guess what? RFK Jr. is on the news for claiming he's going to do 6 days later. I was flabbergasted. I didn't even know how to respond to that. I don't know. I didn't know if it was coincidence. The timeline was a little but I just drop it and move on with my life because what are you going to do? And along the way, I had petitioned Stanford's neurodiversity project to help establish neurodivergent biochemistry as its own field. So when they came out with their cure that directly targets the downstream mechanism that caused the autism traits in my framework, I got mass tagged on social media and again, did not know how to respond to this because, a coincidence happens once, happens twice. Now we're at 3 times and I'm kind of sitting back like, how is this happening? And again, I put it down and I move on with my life because what are you going to do until I get a text from my dad with a press release from Princeton claiming credit for the paradigm shift I created in 2023, delineating autism subtypes into distinct different phenotypes based on biochemical pathways. So I dig through the paper and they actually did the statistical version of what I did, except I used function. They took my exclusivity principle, lots of sciencey stuff. Anyways, another unsighted claim that is my framework. At this point, they're just filling up spots like my framework is a bingo card of replications. And I'm just numb to it. I just document, report. What are you going to do? And then I get a really emotionally charged email telling me to look into this Harvard paper. And I'm like, oh, here we go again. And sure enough, there is my framework as unsighted text. Except this time, it's not the autism part, it's the comorbidities portion, specifically the nervous system. Comorbidities along the nervous system biotoggle. At, once is a coincidence, twice is a coincidence, maybe three times is a coincidence. We're at 4 or 5 times now within the same year of unsighted text using my framework or my methods.